So I'm going to start because we're short of time and we'll catch up. As I said, here at LAF, the public benefits work we do mainly is involving programs that are run by Social Security and programs that are run by public aid. I'm going to use the term public aid because that's what most of our clients utilize. So the Social Security Administration administers programs that I call OASDI because that's the statute that it was based on, Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance. Those programs are the ones where a wage earner puts money into the system and let's see it from here. Puts money into the system and then they're insured in case they reach retirement age, they get a benefit. If they die and leave surviving children or widows, those people can get benefits on their account. And or if they become disabled and they're insured, they can get a benefit and the disabled person can get a dependent benefit for their children. Social Security also administers the SSI program, Supplemental Security Income, which is a welfare or needs-based program. And it's one where you haven't put money into the system. And then the Department of Human Services, or public aid, we usually deal with the SNAP program, which is what food stamps is called. We also deal with the TANF program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is cash assistance, and the folks on TANF also get a medical card, or Medicaid, which is a medical card. And if you're a lawyer here and you're interested, or even if you're not, there are regulations that govern the programs. And then DHS also has a policy manual that's online where you can look at their rules. And if clients get statements from Social Security or public aid, usually it references a policy manual or regulations. So let's see. So the SSI program is a safety net, or some people will call it a welfare program or a means-based program. That means that you have to be financially eligible as well as otherwise eligible for the program. And it's for people who haven't put enough money into the system. And it covers basically disability, either adult disability or there is a children's SSI program. Or old age. So if you're 65 and you don't have enough, 65 or 66, I think it's 65 for SSI, you can get, this was done probably about 2 years ago. The current SSI amount is $735, and there will be a 2% cost of living increase going into effect January 1st, so it'll become $750 a month. And one of the handouts is the Social Security sheet that shows what those amounts will be as of January 1st. And generally it was a check that came on the first of the month. Most people get either a card, or like a link card, or they get direct deposit into their bank accounts. The other program, as I said, is Retirement Survivors and Disability Insurance. You have to have enough money in the system. If you become disabled and you have minor children, they're going to get money on your account as well. Survivors are for survivor minor children. There's also a widow's program where you can get benefits based on your spouse's account, and disability insurance. So retirement survivors, disability insurance. I'm going to kind of breeze through this. I would say, if you have clients that come in with paperwork from Social Security, you can feel free to call me. By the way, I'm also kind of the project administrator for the ICJA program. So I'll just give you my direct line number, 312-229-6353. And we also have in the audience Connie Ortiz over there and Denise Davis, who are, what's her formal title? Your advocates, and they're the people that get the referrals, along with Eva Ortiz, who's not here today, to place cases with LAF. So if you're here because you're with one of our partner agencies, you should be familiar with their names and my name. And if you're not one of our partner agencies and you have a question and you want to get connected to someone who might be able to answer it, feel free to call me. 312-229-6353. I'm going to leave some cards up here as well. So Social Security is developing an online application. It's basically here for Social Security disability insurance. SSI, part of it is online. Otherwise, you go into your local Social Security office where historically clients tend to be treated better than they are at the Public Assistance Office. And that's because people have a perception that you've put money into the system and it's your program and you're entitled to it. So the process is that you file an application for benefits, SSI, SSDI, widow's benefits, whatever it is. They do not have a time limit for making a decision on an application. I would say generally you get like a decision within about 3 months or so. If you're denied, and if you're interested, the medical decisions are not made at the local Social Security office. They go down to a unit in Springfield. They make the medical decision, send it back to the office. They send a letter to you whether you're approved or not approved. If you have a client who has one of what's called a compassionate allowance, there's a list of about 100 diagnoses, including later stage cancers, maybe ALS, dialysis, different things like that. You can get approved like really quickly. They've been moving toward that because the news, of course, was putting on stories about people who were waiting for decisions and died before they actually got their benefits. But usually it'll take about 3 months. Most cases are denied at the initial stage, and if they're denied, they have a right to do a request for reconsideration. They have to file within 60 days. There's a 5-day grace period for mailing. So effectively it's 65 days. You file something called a request for reconsideration. It's another paper review in Springfield of the medical aspects of the case. Takes generally 3 months or so. If that's denied, then you have the right to file a request for a hearing before an administrative law judge. There's a wait in Chicago of about at least a year, maybe 2 years to get a hearing before an ALJ. The ALJ hearing is the first time you have the chance to put your case on in front of a person who's going to make a decision in your case, which makes a difference with a lot of people with, in particular, mental illnesses or depression or things that involve credibility determinations, of how impaired you are. Anyway, if the ALJ denies you, there's another appeal called a paper appeal to the Appeals Council. If that's denied, then you actually can file an appeal in federal court. And at LAF, we do handle cases, at the federal court stage. There is a private bar in Chicago that does Social Security and SSI cases on a contingent fee basis, which is why here at LAF we don't do a lot of just straight initial applications. They're done on a contingent fee basis, as I said, which means the client doesn't have to pay, and the attorney gets paid if the client wins. Only if they win, they can have up to 25% of back benefits to a maximum of $6,000. So there are a lot of really reputable, really good attorneys who do that work here. They are used to dealing with people with mental impairments and homeless clients. There are services that have probably been in the news that are national. Some of them are not as good. If you have any questions about something like that, feel free to call me. That's all I'll say. So sometimes Social Security may give you benefits, but they always give you what's called a continuing disability review time. So they're going to evaluate a case again, usually within 7 years, to see if they think the person's still disabled. And if you file an appeal within the appropriate amount of time, 10 days for SSI, certainly you can continue to get benefits while your appeal is pending. So it's really important if someone gets a letter or when a child ages out of the children's SSI program at age 18, if you file the appeal within 10 days, you can continue to get benefits. So that means you may be still waiting a year or two to get an administrative law judge hearing, but you're getting benefits during that time, so financially it doesn't impact you that much, except that if they find ultimately that you're not disabled, then it does create something called an overpayment. Also, if you are on SSI, as I said, it's a welfare or needs-based program. And if you have any other kind of income or your assets change along the way, it's possible that you aren't entitled to the full amount of the SSI, or you have some kind of income change and you have to report that to Social Security. If it doesn't get reported in time, or if it does get reported in time, sometimes they give you the wrong amount. And these are, as it says, common issues that we see. Sometimes people are terminated because of income or assets. And so, as I said, Social Security can say sometimes that you're not disabled any longer, and you do have the right to appeal. And remember, 10 days to get continuing benefits. So if people come to you with letters, take a look at them, read them, and pay attention to that. And these are just some examples of why they may say that you're not disabled any longer. And overpayment cases can happen because you failed to report household income, or you might have more than $2,000 in assets. And this is something that's true in the SSI program and some of the DHS programs also, where you can have a limited amount of assets. For SSI, for an individual, it's $2,000. So if suddenly your bank account goes over $2,000, that means they consider that you have, you're over asset and you're not eligible for benefits in that month. They may also suddenly learn that you have a house back in Mexico or some other country, which the family inherited, and it could be that 12 siblings or cousins or aunts and uncles inherited it, but they decide that it's worth more than your share is worth more than $2,000. So we handle those kinds of cases, and we're often successful. Can you work and get benefits? There are rules that do allow it. There is something called the, it'll come to me, substantial gainful activity, which Social Security puts out the amount every year. I think it's $1,080 right now, where there's a presumption that if you can work and make that much money that you're not disabled. It's a rebuttable presumption because there are people who do have income, and sometimes it's because Aunt Sally has a factory and lets you work there, or people at the Annexter Center who it's supported work. And with SSI, it's also true that there are circumstances up to a certain amount where you can do some work and still get part of the benefit, both instances. Okay, there's no asset limit or nothing or anything like that with Social Security disability insurance, as I said before, because it's based on you having put money into the system under your FICA taxes. You'll see that on your pay stubs. SSI, all income will have an effect on benefits in some way. Money that is unearned or given to you will reduce your benefits dollar for dollar. There's a $2,000 asset limit for a single person. Some assets are excluded, like the home you live in and one car, and things like that. If you get certain benefits, like crime victim compensation, that's an excluded asset from both SSI and all DHS programs. I'm going to skip that. If they assess you with an overpayment, it's an appealable action, and you have the same kind of 60-day appeal time frame. They'll send a letter to you. And there's also something called a waiver. Sometimes it's not your fault that you were overpaid because, for instance, you told Social Security that there was a change in your income or your household income, and they didn't do anything about that. So to get a waiver of an overpayment, you have to show that it's not your fault and that also that you can't afford to pay it back. Waiver requests suspend recoupment until the final decision. If something like this comes up and you want to give me a call so I can explain it further to the client or we can make an appointment for them, let me know. SSI recoupment is limited to 10% of the benefit. SSDI recoupment can be at 100% of the benefit, but you can go in and request a different payment plan. Because although SSI is like $735 a month, your Social Security disability insurance is based on how much you put into it. And I did also want to say that there are people who get both SSI and SSDI, a check from both programs. And that happens because sometimes people are low-wage earners and their Social Security disability or retirement is at less than even the SSI amount of $735 a month. So what happens if you only get $500 a month from Social Security disability insurance or from retirement? Well, you're eligible to also apply, assuming you're otherwise financially eligible, for SSI. And so you're going to get a benefit that actually takes you up not just to the $735 SSI amount, but $20 above that, $755, because they want somebody who's worked and getting from the Social Security side as well as from SSI to be better off than somebody who's only getting SSI. I hope that made sense. But there are people who get benefits from both programs. We talked a little bit about this. I'm going to go quickly through this because Cynthia wants me to. and you know, you could have a home someplace else, and you know, that is an appealable issue and the type of thing that we do work on. So these are, any decision changed by Social Security can be appealed, and SSI clients should file within 10 days for continuing benefits. And if they are beyond the 10 days, they should still go in and ask for continuing benefits, and you know, talk to them about why they didn't make the appeal within 10 days. And then they get an informal conference, and then they get a denial again, and then you have the request to file for a hearing before an administrative law judge on these kind of what we call resource issues, as well as on the issue of whether you're disabled. So they both follow the same kind of appeal process. Oops. Does this go back? Okay. Anyway. Hold on for a second. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything else. What I missed was a slide that said some of the programs that DHS has that we work with, and that's Medicaid and cash assistance like TANF and SNAP or food stamps. So the first one is Medicaid. Up until the Affordable Care Act went into effect, it was very difficult as a single adult to get Medicaid. And you had to show you were disabled or elderly, basically. And when they say disabled, they mean disabled at the level that would get you Social Security. The greatest thing for us as advocates when the Affordable Care Act came in was that expanded Medicaid happened in Illinois, and single adults between 19 and 64 without disabilities can now get Medicaid. And up to 138% of federal poverty level, which for a single adult, I wrote myself a note here, it's about $1,080, or maybe it's about $1,300 a month. Sorry, I have it written somewhere, but it's somewhere around there. But the bottom line is there's no asset test for this expanded Medicaid, And it's simply a matter of going in and doing an application, and then you have medical coverage. People are in a much better position. Hospitals are in a better position because they can get paid for more of their services, and it's just a wonderful thing. Children under 19 and custodial parents can get Medicaid, and I think it's actually up to 300% of the federal poverty level under kid care. Disabled adults and those 65 and over get traditional Medicaid, which does still have an asset test. And if you're over income for the third kind of, the last kind of Medicaid, there is something called a spend down, which sometimes you'll hear clients talk about. And spend down is one of our fun things here, and if you have any questions, call me. Mm-hmm. Common issues with Medicaid cases. There's Medicaid gets redetermined. I think it's every year now. So a client, and SNAP gets redetermined as well. So clients get a form where they have to do what's called, we call it a RED. And if they don't fill the form out on time, then their benefits will generally stop. And that happens a lot. You may have somebody who comes in and said, my SNAP just stopped. Or, I went to get a prescription filled, or I went to the doctor, and they said, my Medicaid isn't in effect. And it's usually because the person didn't do the redetermination. So, we advise people to go in and file the redetermination. If it's done within a certain amount of time, a number of days from when it was due, then usually things go right into effect back the way they were. Sometimes it's so late that we have to do a new application. I did also include a handout for you, which I don't know where it is, but it says a list of the city offices. We have an enrollment project here at LAF where we have 4 paralegals in the city DFSS offices, like the one in South Chicago, Garfield, the North Area office, Trina Davila, and those paralegals are there on the days on the sheet, and they will actually do redeterminations, applications, and advise people about different DHS programs. And it's a city-funded program, and unfortunately, they're not in the suburbs right now. So the best thing to do is to send a client into DHS directly if you have somebody in the suburbs. Okay. So in terms of Medicaid, that REDs are a big problem. Benefits may terminate because they've done a cross-match and found that the client's income has changed and they're now over income for Medicaid. Over the shift, there's been a shift to managed care in the Medicaid arena. So everybody is assigned to a managed care program, and each of them, they're required to provide the services that Illinois has in the Medicaid program, but they interpret it in some ways differently. So we've seen things like prescription limits, pre-approval problems, and other managed care issues that we do work on for clients. So, okay. So you have somebody, and I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on the DV sexual assault issues after I go through the programs more. So temporary assistance for needy families is for caretaker relatives and children under 18 who have low enough income. There is no asset limit, but it's a really, it pays like not a lot. So a parent with 2 children, so a household of 3 would get $432 a month. And the program standards chart, you can look at it later at your leisure, but it's one of the ones I handed out, tells you how much a child-only grant would be for TANF, how much SNAP is right now, and other income limits. It changes every October, but you've got it if you want to take a look at it. TANF used to be aid to families with dependent children. And in 1996, when welfare reform happened, the idea was that it became temporary assistance for needy families. So that the idea was that people would not be on welfare forever. And that the DHS, the public aid office, was going to really become a social service entity and help people get employment, get training for employment, get GEDs, get alcohol and drug counseling if they needed. They were going to assess people. It was going to be great. and TANF was 60 months on TANF was going to do it for you and your family, and then you're going to be totally self-sufficient. And in the meantime, they were going to give you a really small benefit amount and Medicaid, and you get your SNAP, and you're going to survive. Anyway, we've seen since then that it hasn't turned out to be all roses and whatever. And however, the program does still exist, and I would say it's generally underutilized. And part of it is because TANF, even though there's a 60-month limitation, but the biggest problems that we see are that it has this work requirement with exceptions. So even though if you have a medical barrier, either you or if you can't work because of your own medical problems, or you have a child that you have to care for, or you're a victim of domestic violence and you're engaged in DV activities, or you're in school, or you're in mental health or drug treatment program, the DHS caseworkers make you really work to get one of those exceptions. So a client goes in and they're told you're going to have to work, you're going to have to cooperate with child support, domestic violence, what's that? Basically. It's not quite that bad. It's just you don't have anything showing that you're in a shelter or you're actually in counseling because of the DV, or you don't have something like that. So they don't, they try to scare people and say you're never going to get your TANF or you're going to get cut off TANF. So people go in, and then the other thing that's not on here is that you have to cooperate with child support enforcement. And there's a DV exception for cooperating with child support enforcement, but caseworkers don't always tell clients about that. So if you're scared that you're going to have to be involved with, the abuser, that's something that has to be mentioned. So a denial of TANF, or if the client goes in and gets scared about it, or they're denied a medical barrier exemption, those are all appealable actions. We do those kinds of cases here, and we like to help people with it. And I just want to say to you, when you send someone to apply for TANF, you have to be aware that the DHS caseworker could be their biggest obstacle, because it also involves different kind of paperwork that they don't like to do. So our experience is they really try to discourage people from pursuing TANF cash. And I will say that you do have to be, as Nubia said, a VAWA applicant is eligible for TANF cash for herself, I'm going to use that, and her children. But an undocumented person who has children is not eligible for benefits for herself. But if she has citizen children, there is a TANF child-only grant. Now, she's going to have to report what her income is, because income counts for this and for Medicaid. But there is eligibility for those children. So we have REDI issues, we have changes in benefit amounts or household income or household composition. We have termination of benefits for sanctions for not complying with work activities without good cause. And it can be pretty extreme. So if you see in the sanction section, the first section can be a reduction of the first sanction, a reduction of benefits is 50% until you cooperate, then 50% for at least 3 months, then 100% for at least 3 months. And that's for the adult portion of the grant. And then we have, there can be, there's no waiver process if there's an overpayment or recoupment, but there is an appeal. And also at the 60-month stage, just before it and somewhere along the way, they're supposed to work with the person to once again try to get them in a position where they can be self-sufficient and go off TANF. But there are exceptions. I don't know how to make it go back. Let me just say there are exemptions to the 60-month clock. And working with a DV agency or engaging in activities related to DV or sexual assault is one of those exceptions. Also, if you have a pending Social Security or SSI case and you're waiting for a hearing and you have an attorney working on the case, that's another exception. So it is possible to get benefits beyond that 60 days. So SNAP, one thing I should tell you, this sheet also shows, the program standards does show the SNAP amounts. And the amount up until October 1st for a single individual was $194 a month. It's gone down to $192. So there's just a very slight decrease in the SNAP benefits. So if somebody says to you their SNAP went down, you might want to take a look at the sheet because it may be it's just because SNAP benefits got reduced. And the amount you get is based on income and expenses. There's no asset test. It's done with a concept of a household who lives together and buys food together, buy and prepare food together. It's issued on a link card. There is something called expedited SNAP or emergency benefits. And within 5 days, you're supposed to get it within 5 days, and your liquid assets have to be less than your rent and utilities. U.S. citizen children are always eligible, even if they're living in a mixed eligibility household. And our Trina Davila paralegal is constantly doing SNAP cases for citizen children with undocumented parents. So just remember that's a possibility. Common issues with SNAP, REDs, change in benefit amount, overpayments and recoupments, intentional program violations. This is a concept which goes with SNAP, and that is they usually result when a client uses their SNAP benefits at a grocery store that was determined to be guilty of fraud. So there may be a little corner grocery or something where people are going and exchanging their SNAP for cash instead of buying benefits. So what happens is the SNAP program looks at certain providers and looks to see, you know, if they have the same, like it's always $99 or $49 or something like that, and they do an investigation, and sometimes all the people that shop there get caught up in it. And we do intentional program violation work with clients, and they have a right to a hearing. They don't need to appeal. Sanctions are administered if you admit to fraud or found guilty of fraud, or even you can even waive your right to a hearing. So you have to be very careful about this. Feel free to call for assistance if a client comes in with that. There is an appeal process for IDHS, 60 days for cash or medical, 90 days for food stamps. IPV cases, no need to appeal. You have to file before the date of change on a notice. Appeals can take months. Many can be resolved administratively. So sometimes we tell people to file a new application at the same time that they appeal. And these are the numbers. They're on every notice that a client gets, what the appeal numbers are. And these are examples of things that are appealable. Now, tips for working with any agency. Sometimes go in person if you have time to wait at the DHS office. It's the best way to get your questions answered. Keep copies of all your records. Check for dates because there are appeal time limits. And also, like with SSI, if you appeal within 10 days, you can get continuing benefits. Get receipts. Insist on something that's file stamped. If you go into the DHS office, make sure your name gets on the register so they know that you were there, because it proves that you went in if you were trying to give them changes in your income or documents or something like that. appeal deadlines are very strict, and report, report, report. If there's any change in income or change in circumstance, make sure you report it to your DHS caseworker or to Social Security if that's applicable. So that's all that's on here. I did also want to talk about a couple of other things, and that is there is something called crisis assistance through DHS, which is available to people who are either on TANF or who are applying for TANF and are going to be eligible. So this is something that could come up, with you have somebody who leaves, an abuser and comes in, and maybe they're on TANF, hopefully, or they're eligible for TANF. They have to have kids under 18. And crisis assistance is available to TANF-eligible individuals or recipients who are the victim of domestic or sexual violence, of stalking, of eviction, meaning they have a court order saying they're evicted, or fire, flood, or other natural disasters. So I did give you a handout that I pulled off the DHS website on crisis assistance and also expedited SNAP, which is emergency SNAP. So if you have somebody who's in a crisis situation, it is something that you can apply for. And, we've had clients get like $1,000 in crisis assistance. Unfortunately, it's a one-time payment, but it can help if somebody's trying to, buy some furniture or beds or something. And so it is possible to get it. And eligibility has to be determined within 5 days of the application date for new TANF applicants. The TANF application must also be processed within 5 days and benefits issued for the first 30 days. By the way, SSI benefits, when you receive them, go back to the date of application. TANF benefits only start 30 days after the date of application. So each program is different. It's really a shame. And it's one of the reasons also why we encourage people to appeal. Because if you have an application and you let the application go, and then 2 months later you decide you're going in to apply again, you don't get back benefits generally. You only get benefits either back to the application or whatever the rule is for that program, like TANF, it's 30 days from the application. But if you go in and you apply, they deny you, you appeal timely, and you win your appeal, your benefits go back to that application. And you get benefits as of that application, not a future application. So you can miss out on a lot of back benefits. So it's worth appealing for folks. In terms of undocumented folks, they're not generally eligible for Medicaid, for SNAP, or any of these public benefit programs unless they're like a refugee, an asylee, a VAWA recipient. But if you have a mixed family, the family members that are documented can get benefits. And also all children in Illinois under the age of 18 get Medicaid, documented or undocumented. Also, pregnant women get Medicaid, whether they're documented or undocumented. So that's something to remember. And the other thing I was going to talk about was crime victim compensation, which we've had an ICEJA grant before this grant for the 20 years, Denise, for a long time, where we assisted victims of violent crimes who were trying to get crime victim compensation. So you also have a handout done by the Attorney General's office about crime victim compensation. So it's available, as I said, to victims of violent crime, documented or undocumented. It's one of the few programs where you don't have to have legal status. And you can get up to $27,000 less if it's funeral and burial benefits. What is it, $7,500 for funeral and burial? And it's to reimburse crime victims for expenses that are reimbursable under the Act. And there's a requirement that somebody has to notify police within 72 hours of the crime. There is an exception for people who get orders of protection or civil no contact orders, and they are assumed to have cooperated with the police if they have those orders of protection. So we have an appeal at the moment in the crime victim world, crime victim compensation world, because a DV victim with an order of protection didn't want to go, follow up with the police. The statute says or, doesn't say both. So they denied her because she didn't cooperate with the police, but she had an order of protection. So we filed an appeal, and the appeals are heard once a month before a commissioner. He's the part-time mayor of Melrose Park, and he's pretty kind in most instances. So if you have someone denied crime victim compensation, encourage them to appeal, and even if they attend themselves and put on their case in front of the commissioner, it's possible to get something. So what kinds of things do they reimburse for? Traditionally, the thing they spent the most money on were medical expenses. And if you had medical bills because you were a crime victim and you didn't have health insurance to cover it, then you might be eligible to get crime victim compensation to pay for those bills. More and more people are on Medicaid, so Medicaid is paying hospital bills. In the DV sexual assault arena, crime victim compensation is available for undocumented victims of crime who have medical bills. They can submit those bills for payment by crime victim compensation. The other thing is that crime victim compensation is a program of last resort, so they require that the person apply for charity care at a hospital for hospital bills. So charity care is available to undocumented folks, and however, it only covers the actual hospital bills. So if there are ancillary bills like a radiologist or lab fees or something like that, or an ambulance bill, the famous ambulance bill, which really could be like $1,100 or more. And if two ambulances are involved because they take you to a local hospital and then to a trauma center, it's two hospital bills. So those can be covered by the crime victim compensation because if you don't have medical insurance to pay it, it won't get paid. The other thing is there is SSITA, Sexual Assault Survivors and Treatment Act, which covers rape kits and that kind of thing, and also a short time after the hospital will pay some bills. The patient cannot apply for SSITA, the hospital has to apply for it. So, you might want to ask the hospital if they've submitted the bill. They have to submit the bill within a year of services. So, and it covers, whoever they're seeing in the hospital and the rape kit, and if there's, an appointment or two after the hospital, well, it should cover that as well. So crime victim compensation will ask you, if you file because you were a victim of sexual assault and you've got medical bills, they're going to say, why didn't SSITA pay it? They're going to say, did you submit, for charity care? And that's for everybody, assuming there's no insurance. And even people with insurance have deductibles and co-pays and things like that. Those can be paid by crime victim compensation. So I'll just see if I hit on it. So in the DV arena, we have found traditionally that most of our clients, if they're not, if they're documented, they have Medicaid or they have health insurance. So they don't have that many medical bills. But relocation is another thing that crime victim compensation is supposed to pay for. And they will pay for a security deposit and a first month's rent. However, they see themselves as a reimbursement system, and they require the client or the applicant pay the security and the first month's rent, and then they will reimburse them for it and for moving expenses like a truck or something like that. So you pay first, and then we reimburse you. And that's their system for everything. So a lot of our clients, can't afford to do that. I will tell you that CHA does have a relocation system, so if you are a DV, and did Neha do her? Yeah, okay, so I'm sure she'll hit on that. And so it's very difficult. They will pay, lost wages up to $12.50 a month, but you have to have been employed in the 6 months before the crime, and you have to have been employed on the day of the crime. So we've had people who ended their employment on Friday, were a crime victim on Monday, and they won't give them lost wages. So that's a general overview. Oh, there is also one thing for undocumented clients, and that is there is something called Emergent or Emergency Medicaid. And that's available if someone goes to the hospital and they have a really serious condition, so the hospital bill can be submitted to Medicaid, and it can cover very short-term medical treatment after the hospitalization. So, so if you're undocumented and you end up in the hospital and it's bad enough, the hospital will apply for this emergency Medicaid. It won't pay. I mean, we have had, unfortunately, undocumented clients who are in the hospital. They get a bill of, thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they really need nursing home services, and this won't pay for that. So this is where you get into issues of hospitals trying to dump people or get them deported back to their home country because there's no payment for them. And they end up generally in the hospital for an extended period until the hospital can figure out what they can do. That's another fun arena. So I think I've covered crisis assistance, expedited SNAP, charity care, SECITA, emergency Medicaid, regular Medicaid. We really want to help people with these public benefit issues. And so, if you have somebody, who comes to you and you're helping them with something else and they have questions about this, we're happy, to either take some cases of the kinds that we take or to try to advise you or otherwise see what we can do. Yes, Colson.
Sometimes in the domestic violence realm, we're not effectively thinking about public benefits as a DV issue. So could you share, Gloria, a couple of concrete examples of the cases that you take and how those two issues intersect in those cases? I think it helps people issue spot when they're working with it.
Well, I was trying to say in TANF in particular. You have a DV client who goes in to apply for TANF, and they are required to give them an exemption from work activities. And that's assuming that the client, it's not just that because you are a DV victim or have been, it's because you're engaging in activities related to the DV. You're in a shelter and you have to do things at the shelter, or you have counseling, or you have, things along those lines. Yeah.
How long does the clock stop?
Say that again?
How long does the clock stop for?
It does stop. I don't have a thing right here off the top of my head. It can stop for a variety of periods depending on the activities. So I think the clock does stop for DV. I'm sorry, because I can find out for you and get back to you.
I was just wondering, is it like a couple months or like is it a year?
I think it can be as long as you're engaged in those activities. Okay, and there's an exception if you're, if you hit 60 months and you're engaged in activities, it can also extend beyond the 60 months. Yeah. Feel free to step in because.
I don't remember the answer to your question off the top of my head, but we did do some work on that a couple of years ago. So I can look for those handouts and share them maybe later if I find them. Gloria, an issue that came up often when I was looking through this is that the coercive person had our client sign up for benefits fraudulently. I know it's very sticky and complicated territory, but do you have any advice or analysis around that piece of like if people are being pursued for fraudulent public benefits?
I think it's a question of exactly as Nubia was saying. I mean, you go consult an attorney and they look and see what they can do about filing an appeal and proving that it really, that it was that circumstance. So a lot of it is fact-based, and what kind of facts you can come up with to support the situation. It's just like the intentional program violation. You have the grocery store that is, being closed out of the SNAP program because they're engaging in that. But then you do have innocent people who are kind of swept up in it. but they have the right to have the hearing and show that they actually were legitimately using their SNAP at that place. But I do have an answer. Okay, months that do not count toward your 60-month clock include working 30 hours a week, 35 hours a week for households with 2 parents, attending higher education programs up to 36 months. You need a 2.5 GPA for the semester, and DHS must approve the education program and will often avoid mentioning this option. Caring for a sick or disabled family member, that's the medical barrier exemption. You must request a family care barrier, and you're eligible for a family violence exclusion as well if you're engaging in those activities. So any of those months where that's true don't count toward the 60-month limit. And if a caretaker relative uses up their 60-month clock, the related child remains eligible for TANF as a child-only grant. So, and the biggest thing we see here, and as I said, TANF is underutilized as far as I'm concerned. There are women and children who aren't getting even the pitiful amount of TANF cash because they decide it's not worth the paperwork or going to DHS or going to that public aid program. Because it's not worth the amount that they're going to get. Or they're getting child support under the table and they don't want to have to report that or get the guy in trouble or anything like that. But I do want to put a plug in. We've had a lot of homicide survivor children, children whose parents were killed. And, if the child support is not documented by an order or something like that, you can't get that from crime victim compensation. And sometimes you have to show to Social Security also that even though the parents weren't married and they may not have a paternity case done, that is the person's child. So, having a formal order or getting that parentage order can have long-term benefits, for the child. And on that note, I'm done.